Hey guys, Craig Graves here, co-host of the Through a Therapist's Eyes podcast. And today is our second installment of the short outtakes that Chris and I are doing. We're kind of experimenting around with this concept. Some of the feedback that we've gotten is you guys are putting out a great show. I just don't have time to sit down and listen to an hour of a podcast. So we're taking short segments that we think will be helpful to our listening audience, and any newbies too who come along and hear this. And we're pulling those out and publishing them as small 10 to 15 minute or less podcasts. And I'd love to hear your feedback on what you think about these short segments. Today's segment comes to us from episode 43. 43 was one that we did with Dr. Paul Weigle. Screen time for kids and gaming addiction. Dr. Weigle is a child adolescent psychiatrist and associate medical director at Natchaug Hospital of Hartford Healthcare in Connecticut, where he serves as medical staff president. And I hope I got the pronunciation of that hospital right. Dr. Weigle is an expert on the effects of video game and internet habits on the mental health of youth. And in this episode, we talked about the effects of gaming and gaming addictions on youth. In this particular segment, Dr. Weigle talks about how gaming use among youth is changing their behaviors. And also, too, I asked Dr. Weigle if violent video games make children more prone to violence. And I thought he had a very interesting answer and one that you may not expect. So let's get into the episode, the short episode.
So I want to end today talking in a little bit about what, Craig, you kind of caught me a little bit flat-footed on. That was my listening back on our social media, Parenting in a Social Media Environment show. You know, he asked me, Dr. Weigle, what suggestions would you give parents? And I gotta be honest with you, I was a little embarrassed and frustrated with myself. Remember how we kind of kicked through that, and I was kind of like, I don't.
Yeah.
I sputtered a little bit. So I want to end with that for sure.
Yeah.
Which leaves us only about 10 minutes or so to look at what I was going to open with. So here we go. How do games and social media affect kids, and how do they affect adults? Sort of just broad scope to you to see what you would say. Yeah.
Well, in general, I think that the biggest effect they have, for bad and for good, is that they displace everything else. Right, the average kid and average teen in the United States spends 7 hours a day on screens. That's average. So, which over the course of the year is twice as much time as they spend in school. It has really changed things. Looking at the year 2000, it was just about half as much. So, in just 18 years, the average use has doubled. Now, so with this change, what are they not doing, right? If you're spending 7 hours a day on average, and of course there's some who spend 12 hours a day and some who spend only a few, then what are you not doing? There's some terrible things that you're not doing, right? Adolescent drug use and alcohol use has declined, right? They're not smoking or drinking as much as they did. Even pot, for all the concerns about it becoming legal, average teen is using less pot than they were 20 years ago.
Is that right?
They're also not having sex. Oh yeah, wow. Absolutely. Yeah. The CDC has data on last month use for all sorts of different substances.
Sex is down too?
Yeah, well, certainly if you don't count sexting, then yes. So they may be sending each other pictures, but no one's getting pregnant. The teen pregnancy rate has plummeted in the last 20 years. So they're not. Yes. Also, they're not driving, so the teen car accident rate has plummeted. So accidents are no longer the second. Have decreased very significantly. They're about half of what they were. Teen death by car accidents around the year 2000. And finally, violence. The violent crime rate among adults, yes, but among teenagers as well, has also plummeted since the 90s. It's half of what it was. So they might be shooting each other online, but they're not shooting each other in the streets, right? So these are some of the really positive changes that have come with it. So when parents, like, when they see their kid playing games and they have mixed feelings about it, they're sitting in a room all day, a lot of times parents, at least they know where they are, right? They're not worried about their physical safety and all these things that used to haunt parents, much more so in the 80s than they do today. Now, there's also other things, of course, that they're not doing, and that's activities with educational value, right? Teens are spending less time doing homework than they did. They're spending less time reading for fun than they did, so this is something that has really changed. They are getting less exercise than they were, and the obesity rate continues to climb, which has been climbing with the rise of screen media in the lives of young people since the 70s. But it has continued to climb in recent years, and all of the ailments that go with a lack of exercise, back pain and neck pain, and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting stuff. So you brought up the negative side of it. So buzzkill. I was going to say, well, great, bring on the virtual reality.
Well, I was just going to say, if these games are better than sex, I'm going by the store on the way home to get me one.
Yeah.
No, but on a serious note there, you said something else I thought was interesting about the violence among teens going down, because, you know, one of the theories that you hear about school shootings and stuff like that is these violent games are desensitizing kids to this thing and maybe making them not see reality. Is there any real evidence behind that statement?
You know, it's really hard to study school shooters because they're so few. I mean, I know we're hearing about one, it seems like every other day, but it is very hard to study that kind of thing. That said, there is a massive amount of scientific literature that shows us, studies that show us that playing violent games does make people more aggressive. It does desensitize to violence. These things are true, but the effect size is actually very small, right? So it doesn't push an average kid to become a killer. It does not. It gives you a tiny little nudge in that direction, right?
Right.
You're less likely to be helpful to other people. You're more likely to see other people as hostile, but the effect is small. So, of course, most kids are playing violent games to some degree, and most are not becoming violent, right? There is data that shows us that we should be concerned about the negative effects of violent games, but it is not the sole cause of this kind of behavior, not by a long shot. Now, the other thing I do want to point out is that oftentimes killers have used violent video games as a way to train to be better killers, and I do think these games are very, very realistic. This young man, Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people in Norway, said the way he did train at the firing range, but he also trained by playing Call of Duty. He called it training simulation, and the U.S. military uses these type of games to train soldiers so that it can actually make killers more effective, unfortunately.
Interesting comments there from Dr. Weigle for sure. So it's not going to turn an average kid into a killer, but it sounds like there's definitely some research that says it can give you a little nudge, and it can also be used as a training tool for people who are going to carry out those kind of events. So very interesting conversation. I would encourage you to listen to that whole episode if you're interested on screen time and gaming addictions. And Chris and I have also done shows on social media and mental health and social media and parenting. If you want to find those, you can find them on our website, throughwhatherapisteyes.com. We have an entry for every show we've published so far, and you can stream directly from the website, or you can find them all on your favorite podcast platforms. And again, love to hear your feedback on these shorts. We hope that they're helpful. You can go to our website, throughwhatherapisteyes.com, click on the Contact Us link, and send us an email that way. There's an option to send anonymously, or you can send Chris an email directly by sending an email to contact@throughwhatherapisteyes.com. Love to hear your feedback, folks. Thank you for listening, guys. We really appreciate you, and We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll talk to you guys again real soon.